The Last Row Shootout on Bump Day was interesting, with Catherine Legg, Marcus Ericsson, Graham Rahal, and Nolan Siegel all trying to get into the race. Legg was the quickest of the drivers in the Last Row Shootout. She'll start 31st. Ericsson, who's starting at 32nd, had a very stressful session after lifting at the beginning of the final lap on his first qualifying attempt. He can't count to 4. Now, a horrible mental error for the 2022 Indy 500 champion, but he was able to recover from it and put his number 28 Andretti Global Honda into the show. The 33rd and final spot went to Graham Rahal, who was in the Last Row Shootout for the second straight year. Our Grid Live wrap-up, Kobe, Ben and Joe were sceptical about Rahal's chances of making the race, given all the problems with the number 15 team, despite the Dale Corn Racing cars being the favourite to get bumped. Speaking of the Corn cars, one of them ended up failing to qualify. Nolan Siegel's number 18 team wasn't able to unlock enough speed in their road course car after a scary wreck and flip in qualifying damaged their primary car. Siegel crashed during his final qualifying attempt and left it all on the track. The photo taken there by James Black from Penske Entertainment as well. So where does this Last Row Shootout rank compared to Bump Day drama we've seen in recent years?
Well, Josh, compared to the Last Row Shootout we've seen in recent years, I obviously don't think it was the best, but we still had some intriguing storylines. I don't think it'll definitely top Alonso getting bumped by Kyle Kaiser or Graham Rahal getting bumped last year with Jack Harvey. I actually went back and watched some of the most recent bump days, and I totally forgot that Jack Harvey had, a slow qualifying run, and then immediately after pulling to the pits, they're going to go again, and people were like, why is he just wasting his time? Because the car is still hot, he's not cooling it down, he's just going out again, and then by some miracle, Harvey ends up bumping Rahal out. I thought those were two of my favorite bump days, and obviously remember when James Hinchcliffe got bumped from the field as well. But like I said, this year's bump day was interesting because I didn't expect to see Marcus Ericsson in this position, and Marcus said himself, he put them in this position when I ended up crashing out in practice, and they had to go to a backup car, which obviously isn't as fast as their primary, but Andretti was able to make it work, and it just shows how stressful these type of situations are. I didn't expect Marcus Ericsson to abort his run at the start of his fourth and final qualifying lap. I thought something that happened to the car. I thought his engine had blown or something, but when we found out it was a mental error, I was like, oh my goodness, Marcus, how could you do that? And I guess when the person on the radio, came on and said white flag, I don't know if Marcus Brains said checkered flag or something like that, but it was just really odd to see him lift and make such huge of a mistake, and then to see his Andretti team waiting until almost the very end for him to go back out there. It was definitely nerve-wracking for sure, but Ericsson got in the show, Catherine Leggett as well, Graham Rahal. I'm sure he's very relieved to be in the show this year after getting bumped last year and then having to fill in for Stephen Wilson in the Dry and Rumble car last year. And it was super unfortunate for Nolan Siegel when he had that scary wreck and flip in qualifying. It's never good when you have to go to a road course car on a super speedway because the road course car obviously don't have all the special little kinks and things, to make it go really fast. And I think the Dale Coyne team tried the best that they possibly could with that road course / backup car, but it just didn't have the speed. And we saw Nolan's final qualifying run of the day that the speed just wasn't there on lap one. And by the time Nolan had ran that first lap, we basically knew it was over. And he earned a lot of respect from the drivers in the paddock. Although he ended up crashing out there too, second time in a few days, the drivers respect him for sending and leaving out there all on the track instead of lifting. And I'm sure Nolan Siegel will be back at some point, and he will get to compete in this race, and he'll have a long IndyCar career ahead of him. If you watch Nolan Siegel in Indy Next series, then you really know how talented of a young driver he is. And I think that this situation can only make him stronger. And James Hinchcliffe said it best on X. He said it just a few years ago, that was a young driver who ended up getting bumped from the Indy 500. His name was Pato O'Ward, and look where he is now. He's driving for one of the top teams in the NTT IndyCar Series at Arrow McLaren. So if Nolan Siegel's filling down, look at the Pato O'Ward story and look where he could potentially go in the future.
Yeah, fair play to Nolan Siegel, because he absolutely left it all out there trying to get himself in the race after, as you mentioned, Josh, crashing their primary car, having to switch to the backup, etc., etc. I feel like and Matthew Owens is watching and he'll back me up on this. The Indy 500 qualifying, there you go. Exactly what I was about to say. First off, Indy 500 qualifying, he's still undefeated. There's nothing better. I do think we need to rename the Last Row Shootout to make it 5-10 cars so that we're not just doing nothing for 30 minutes. And that was the point I was going to raise. While we're at this number of, obviously the magical 33, when we've got 34 or 35 cars entered, it's going to be like this. If we can get back to the days of 40 plus cars coming to try and get in the race, then maybe they'll switch it back to how it was. But the qualifying builds, doesn't it? We have the normal runs, and the Renus VK start preempting a hot when we get to hots and nots in a little while. But Renus VK, goodness me, that was just full drama, wasn't it, to get in on the gun on Saturday. And then that you got the two shootouts for the last row and for the front row on Sunday. It's just, I think, wasn't so much of a viewer of it because we didn't have so much coverage back in the day of the qualifying session, and now we've got every session on Peacock and through Sky Sports F1 here in the UK. We can follow it all, and it just builds and builds and builds all the way through to that final weekend. I think we've talked down about IndyCar a lot on this show and on the network over the portion of the first 5 months of the year, but the Indianapolis 500 qualifying is absolutely spot on, and they don't need to touch it or change it in any way.